she lost her child, her strength, and perhaps, the man she loves. After surviving a brutal kidnapping and suffering a heartbreaking miscarriage, Linda's body and spirit are left fragile and broken. When she collapses alone in the fields, it's not Quang, the man who once promised to protect her, who shows up, but his mother. As Linda recovers in silence, her heart begins to question what hurts most, the pain of loss or the absence of love. Is Quang still the same man? Or has he already let go? Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe now to follow Linda's emotional journey in full. The story begins here. Ever since the terrifying ordeal of being kidnapped by her ex-husband, Linda's world had never truly returned to normal. What followed was even more devastating, the miscarriage. That one moment, that single unbearable loss, left a permanent scar on her body and soul. From that day forward, Linda was no longer the vibrant woman people once knew. Her laughter faded. Her eyes, once full of dreams, now held a quiet sadness. She suffered from postpartum complications, although there was no child in her arms to show for it, only the emptiness left behind. Physically, her body weakened day by day. She was constantly fatigued, her immune system fragile, and her appetite nearly gone. Most days, she pushed through the exhaustion in silence, trying to maintain a sense of purpose by returning to the fields. The land, with its quiet patience, gave her some sense of stability. It was her way of coping, digging her fingers into the soil, pretending that by nurturing the earth, she could also heal herself. But the truth was, she was far from okay. The abdominal pain came and went in waves. Some days, it was a dull ache. Other days, it struck like lightning, sharp, sudden, merciless. She dismissed it at first, thinking it was her body still adjusting. But as the pain became more frequent and intense, it gnawed at her spirit. Still, Linda said nothing. She didn't want to worry anyone. And besides, Quang wasn't around like he used to be. That morning, the sky was overcast, the air heavy with the smell of wet soil. Linda had gone out early to help with the rice harvest. She forced a smile as she joined the workers in the field, but the moment she bent down to gather the bundles of straw, a burning pain shot through her lower abdomen. She staggered back, her breath hitching. "Not now," she whispered to herself. She straightened up, willed her legs to move, but her body betrayed her. The pain intensified with every step, until finally, it became unbearable. She collapsed right there, in the middle of the narrow path between two rice paddies. Her hands clutched her belly, her forehead pressed to the ground. A sharp gasp escaped her lips, but the vastness of the field swallowed her voice. The workers were far, and the clouds above threatened rain. Her vision blurred. Fear gripped her as a dark thought crept in. What if no one finds me? What if this is how it ends? Then, faint footsteps. A voice calling her name. Linda could barely lift her head, but through the haze, she saw a familiar silhouette approaching. It was the last person she expected, Mrs. Lun, CEO Quang's mother. The older woman rushed to her side without hesitation, kneeling beside her in the mud. "Linda! What's wrong? Can you hear me?" she cried out, holding Linda's trembling hand. Without waiting for an answer, she called for help and arranged immediate transport to the local clinic. In that moment, as her consciousness faded in and out, Linda realized something strange. Of all the people she expected to come to her aid, Quang wasn't one of them. And the person who had once doubted her the most, his mother, was now the one saving her life. The sterile white walls of the clinic felt cold against Linda's skin, but the worst had passed. After hours of urgent care and observation, the doctors confirmed it was a post-miscarriage complication that could have turned fatal had she not been brought in time. The medication was working. Her vitals were stabilizing. Yet, lying there under the thin blanket, a slow, gnawing sadness crept in, not because of the pain, but because of the silence. Linda turned her head toward the window. Outside, the rain finally fell, soft and rhythmic, tapping against the glass like a lullaby for her aching heart. She let her eyes follow the trails of water trickling down, her mind wandering to the moment she collapsed in the fields. What would have happened if no one found her? Or if it wasn't Mrs. Lon who had walked by? The thought was chilling. Mrs. Lon had stayed at the clinic longer than Linda expected. She wasn't warm or overly affectionate, but she was present. She arranged for food, spoke with the doctor, and even adjusted Linda's blanket when she shivered. The same woman who once looked at Linda with suspicion and subtle disapproval was now quietly watching over her like a mother would. Linda didn't know what to say. She whispered a thank you once, and Mrs. Lon only nodded, eyes lingering for a moment longer than necessary. But Linda's gratitude was quickly eclipsed by something heavier. The one person she hoped would rush to her side had not shown up. Not even a phone call. Not a single message. Her heart ached in a way the doctors couldn't treat. Where was Quang? Since the day she returned after being kidnapped, and especially after losing the baby, Quang had become increasingly distant. At first, Linda tried to understand. Perhaps he was overwhelmed, burdened with work, unsure of how to handle the pain between them. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into silence, her hope thinned. Sometimes he would call briefly, his tone distracted. Sometimes she would text him and receive no reply. And sometimes, he would disappear altogether, unreachable for days. She had thought the trauma they both suffered would bring them closer, that their shared grief would strengthen their bond. But instead, it felt like they were drifting apart, slowly, like two ships leaving opposite shores. And she didn't know why. Lying there in the stillness of the clinic, Linda replayed his promises in her mind. No matter what happens, I'll be there for you." She remembered how he had held her hands when they first heard the heartbeat of their baby. How his eyes had glowed when he whispered about building a future together. Those moments now felt like dreams slipping through her fingers, lost to time and unanswered questions. The nurse entered quietly, checking her blood pressure, offering a soft smile before leaving again. The room returned to silence. Linda's hands found her belly, the place where life once stirred inside her. The place where hope had blossomed and died. Her throat tightened. She didn't cry. She was too tired to cry. But she felt the weight pressing down on her chest, heavier than any fever or cramp. Not from the physical pain, but from Quang's absence. His silence was louder than any scream. And she couldn't shake the thought that it started to bloom in the back of her mind, quietly, insistently. Did he stop loving me? That question sat with her like a shadow, refusing to leave even as the rain outside began to fade. That night, sleep came to Linda in fragments. Each time she closed her eyes, her dreams betrayed her, memories bleeding into illusions, then shattering into silence. She would wake with a start, heart pounding, breath shallow, the lingering question still echoing inside her. Did Quang stop loving me? The clinic room was dim now, lit only by the soft glow of a wall lamp. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of earth and wet grass. Somewhere down the hall, a nurse's footsteps echoed softly, but Linda felt utterly alone. She stared at the ceiling, tracing invisible lines in the plaster as if it could give her answers. She had always believed love could endure pain. That if two people had truly chosen each other, they could face any storm. She had held on to that belief when she was trapped, when she bled, when her screams went unheard. It was Quang's face she pictured in the dark. It was his name she had whispered, over and over, believing it had the power to keep her alive. But now, it wasn't fear that haunted her. It was doubt. She remembered how gentle he used to be, how his voice could calm the tremors in her heart, how he used to wrap her in his arms like he could shield her from the world. But lately, his warmth had become a memory rather than a presence. His calls were brief. His visits had stopped altogether. He didn't even know she was in the clinic, not unless his mother had told him. And even then, there was no message. No sign that he cared. She had nearly collapsed in a field alone. Linda didn't want to think the worst of him. She knew Quang had his own burdens. The company. His father's health. The expectations that came with his title. She had never demanded anything from him, only his heart. And yet, now she wondered if he had already taken it back without telling her. She turned on her side, pulling the blanket to her chin, her fingers instinctively brushing against her stomach. A soft gasp escaped her lips, not from pain, but from the hollowness she felt inside. There should have been life here. A heartbeat. A future. but all that was left was stillness. It wasn't just the child she mourned, it was the life she thought she was building with Quang. She had pictured a home. She had pictured mornings where he kissed her forehead while she brewed coffee, laughter echoing in a house filled with light. Now, even the memory of those dreams brought more hurt than comfort. Perhaps the trauma had changed him. Perhaps it had changed them both. But change shouldn't erase love, should it? She closed her eyes again and tried to recall the last time he looked at her with tenderness. The last time he said her name with that quiet reverence. The truth struck her with the force of a wave. She couldn't remember. Not clearly. Not without digging through the fog of disappointment and distance that had grown between them. Tears finally came, not loud, not dramatic, just a slow, steady stream that dampened her pillow. She let them fall, silently, as if mourning not just the baby she lost, but the man she was losing too. "Do you still love me, Quang?" She whispered it into the darkness, knowing no one would answer. But deep down, she knew, if he didn't come soon, if he didn't choose her again, she would have to start asking a different question. Not does he still love me? But can I still love someone who no longer tries to stay?
Hello, xin chào tất cả mọi người. Vậy là tập phim ngày hôm nay của kênh Lý Tử Nhịp Đa Review đã kết thúc tại đây. Không biết rằng mọi người thấy tập ngày hôm nay có hay có nhiều cảm xúc không? Nếu mọi người thấy